So one day, a long time ago, I was playing with my oldest child, and they said, let's play kingdoms. And I said, okay. And they said, I'll get the stuff for my kingdom. And they got the Tonka truck, dump truck, and the jumbo jet, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And they said, I will be the king of big things. And I said, what do I get to be king of? And they handed me a marble and a jack. And they said, you can be the king of little things. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea for a story. I said, you play by yourself. I'm going to my office, Cats in the Cradle. And so, that was a joke. There, they'll edit that laughter in. So I went to my office and I wrote this story called The King of Little Things, and it was probably 2,000 words long, and I started telling it on stage. That was my intent, was for it to be a story that you tell on stage. And this was in about 2005, I guess, 2006. And a friend of mine who's a pretty prominent children's book author said, do you want that to be a children's book? And I said, wow, yes, that would be a great idea. And she said, we might need to edit it a little bit. And I said, that's fine. And I was joking. I said, that's fine, as long as we leave 3 words. By Bill Lepp. That's about all that got left. We took about a 2,000, 1,500 word story, and over like the next 5 years, we edited it down to 750 words. And it was a really interesting process because the editors would call me and they would say, line 3 on page 8 is totally inappropriate for a children's book. You need to cut it. And I would say, but I love that line. And they would say, you have to learn to kill your babies, which is what they say in the publishing world. So I would take out line 3 on page 8, and they would call me back in a year, and they'd be like, we're missing something on page 8. And I'd be like, I know what we can put on page 8. And I would take the same line and put it back in, and they would say, that's genius. That's totally appropriate for a children's book. So it took like 5 or 6 years for the book to finally came out. And then it's called The King of Little Things. And it's for sale out in the lobby. I totally just didn't mean this to be a commercial. And then it was kind of relevant, you'll see why, around 2016. And then it was relevant for the next several years. And then it fell out of relevance. And now it's kind of relevant again. And I sort of wish it would quit being relevant. But I'm going to tell it to you, and you can decide whether it's relevant or not. So, long ago, far away, on the other side of the mountain, there lived a king. He was the king of little things. He was the king of keys, coins, crumbs, and condensation. He was the king of needles, noodles, knots. Now I messed it up. He was the king of keys, coins, crumbs, and condensation. He was the king of needles, noodles, beetles, baby rattles, little ballerina dolls, toy soldiers, pin cushions, pet names, and small kindnesses. Now, all around the king of little things, there were bigger kings. There were kings of cities, kings of counties, kings of countries, and kings of continents. The big kings made their subjects pay for everything, for freedom, for food, for firewood. The king of little things gave anything to anyone who asked politely. The big kings all had big castles. They'd have huge parties on Friday and Saturday night. They'd make everybody attend. King of little things had a little cabin, might have a few friends over. The big kings all had aspirations. The kings of cities wanted to be kings of counties. The kings of counties wanted to be kings of countries. The kings of countries wanted to be kings of continents. And the kings of continents wanted to rule the world. The king of little things just wanted to remember his wife's birthday. Well, one day, one of the big kings, King Normus, he decided it was time to take over the world. So he got together his generals, he got together his advisors, he amassed his armies, and he set out, and he quashed the kings of the cities, and he crushed the kings of the counties, and he conquered the kings of the countries, and he obliterated the kings of the continents. And when he thought that he had taken over the entire world, he had his jewelers make him a fine suit with big brass buttons. No, he had his tailors make him a fine suit with big brass buttons. He had his jewelers make him a huge crown with thousands of tiny jewels. He threw a huge banquet. He stood in front of everyone, and he said, I am now the biggest king that ever was. I am the king of the sky. I am the king of the oceans. I am the king of the mountains. I am the king of the trees. I am the king of the rivers. I am the king of the whales. I am the king of the pachyderms. And he would have gone on like that forever. Except a servant in the back of the room raised a tremulous hand. And he said, excuse me, my enormous sire, you are indeed the king of the sky and the king of the pachyderms. But I am afraid that there is one king whom you have overlooked in your quest to conquer the world. And King Normus said, who, which, what king have I overlooked in my quest to conquer the world? And the servant said, sir, you have overlooked his minuscule majesty, the king of little things. Well, this threw King Normus into a rage. He said, king of little things, king of little things. Little things don't have a king. He said, everybody knows that little things exist simply to serve the bigger things. But still and all, he got together his generals, he got together his armies, and he set out to conquer the king of little things. Well, they got to the king of little things' cabin in the evening, and the king of little things was in the kitchen doing the dishes because he knew that it was the little things that matter the most. He also knew, as David Holt says, that no man has ever been willingly shot in the back while doing the dishes, which is not a line that made it into the book. So King Little Things looked out. He saw the big king's armies. He knew that they would wait till morning to attack. So he went out on his front porch, and he respectfully asked some of his subjects if during the night they would invade the big king's camp. And when the big king's soldiers awoke, they couldn't attack. Chiggers and ticks and mosquitoes had gotten underneath their armor. Athlete's foot fungus had crawled down their boots and in between their toes. They itched so bad they couldn't attack. There were worms in the meat, weevils in the wheat, flies in the fruit. Termites had eaten away the arrow shafts, the spear shafts, the cannon wheels, the catapult. So King Normus requisitioned new equipment, arrows with steel shafts, spears with steel shafts, steel wheels on the cannon, a steel catapult. So the king of little things asked his friend Rust to ride his friend Dew into the big king's camp. And once again, when the big king's soldiers awoke, they couldn't attack. Rust had eaten through their armor. It had eaten through the arrow shafts. The cannon wouldn't roll. The catapult was now about as dangerous as a cantaloupe. And King Normus was in his enormous tent, marching back and forth. What am I going to do? I can't defeat this king. How can I defeat this king? He controls the little things to create chaos. And then he had an idea. He said, I know what I'll do. He said, I'll cheat. I'll lie, because the king of little things is not the king of lies, because a lie, no matter how small, is never a little thing. He said, send a soldier with a flag of truce to get the king of little things, tell him to come to my headquarters to discuss the situation of the siege, and when he gets here, we'll capture him and we'll throw him in the dungeon. Well, they sent the soldier, and the king of little things came with him. He knew what was happening, but he also knew that his servants would come to his rescue if need be. And as soon as the king of little things walked into King Normus's tent, all of the little things in the tent recognized their king. The coins rolled out of King Normus's coffers and bowed down before the king of little things. The jewels jumped out of King Normus's crown. The fillings fell out of his teeth. The buttons jumped off of his coat. His suspenders surrendered. His belt broke, and his pants fell down. Yeah, there's at least one fourth grader in the audience. So there stood King Normus, trying to hold up both his pants and his pride in front of the king of little things. He was so upset, he said, throw him in the dungeon, throw him in the dungeon. But when they got to the dungeon, once again, all of the little things recognized their king. The keys refused to unlock the locks. The nails jumped out of the dungeon doors, bowed down before the king of little things. King Normus said, put him in a cave, put him in a cave, put a big rock in front of the cave, no food, no water, till he surrenders his kingdom. So the king of little things went to the cave, and life wasn't entirely unpleasant in the cave. The ants brought him crumbs, the bees brought him honey, the birds brought him seeds. Little drops of water made their way down through the mountain and dripped into his mouth. But after a while, he missed his queen. He missed his cottage. He got a little bit bored. And so the king of little things sent word with the ants and the birds and the bees, asking them to ask the little things everywhere to do him a favor. And the ants carried the words like crumbs, and the bees painted the words on the flowers, and the birds dropped the words from the sky like rain. And all over the world, little things began to happen. Springs sprung strings, unstrung hangers, unhung bolts, bolted boats, listed tables toppled, chairs folded, easels eased away, quilts quivered, quills quit, fires froze, pickles undilled, cookies crumbled, bread broke, and ticks and tocks left their clocks. And everything everywhere quit working. And everybody knew that it was King Normus's fault. And they demanded that the king of little things be set free. Well, King Normus could see that he was beat, so he surrendered his crown, and he loaded some of his enormous possessions onto his enormous wagon, including his enormous wife. She was very tall, and off they rode. And the people presented the crown to the King of Little Things, who asked very little of his new subjects, except that they leave crumbs for the ants, plant flowers for the birds and the bees, oil hinges regularly, say please and thank you, and tip generously. And everyone lived adequately ever after. Except, of course, King Normus, who could never find his wallet or his comb or his watch. And maybe even he will someday learn that it's the little things that matter the most.